Well, welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brett Delan. I coordinate the Entrepreneurship program. I teach some courses here. I advise the student fund. So I have sort of a lot of different hats, and that's very typical of entrepreneurs, and that's what makes me really happy to be part of it. But today we're here for our first workshop on angel funding. And I really want to welcome Charlie Johnson. Very excited to have him here. A little bit of background, as a private equity attorney, Charlie's been an active participant in investing in all kinds of companies, mostly very entrepreneurial ones, in all kinds of businesses for over 30 years. So talk about war stories and experiences and what works and what doesn't in reality. He's got that. Charlie recently became Associate Director of the Bethune Center for Entrepreneurship at UMass at the Eisenberg School of Management. Charlie is also an Associate Clinical Professor there. He teaches classes on entrepreneurial finance and launching startups, and in fact that's how I got to know Charlie via Sri, who's taking classes there and was raving about what Charlie has done, which is unfortunate. The good news is there's a lot to rave about. Bad news is it's hard to get into these classes because there's so much raving going on all over the UMass campus. But also as a new part of his work, Charlie is the Managing Director of the Maroon Venture Partners Fund at UMass. This fund provides funds to support innovative entrepreneurial ventures that have a connection to UMass in the range of $50,000 to $200,000. And in some important ways, it's similar to the Seed Fund for Innovation that we have here at Hampshire that some of you, or almost all of you, have been hearing about from time to time, with a new cycle of funding coming up next spring. But before he came to UMass, I mentioned Charlie was a private equity attorney. He was a partner at Choate Hall & Stewart in Boston, where he was a senior member of the private equity group and was also served as chair of Choate's Business and Technology Group for 5 years. And he's had activity in other trade associations and other entrepreneurial groups, like the Massachusetts Medical Device Industry Council, where he's one of the directors. And of course, Charlie received his law degree from the University of Virginia back in the 80s and has been helping companies ever since. So with that, I'm just going to let Charlie take charge.
All right, enough about me. So here's the deal. I understood that you've got a seed fund going here at Hampshire, and so the initial thought was that I would come and talk a little bit about seed investing, and I have some experience doing it now that I'm the managing director of this fund at UMass, which I think is quite similar to what you guys are doing. So I've prepared a few things I want to share with you, some thoughts. But before I do, I'd like real quickly just to go around the room, and I'd like to just, if you could just give me like a sentence or two, what's on your mind? What is it that you really want to learn? And by the way, we're going to have 2 sessions. I'm going to do this today, and then, I don't know, week after Thanksgiving. I forget what the date is, but we've got something in the calendar. So could we just kind of quickly go around? Tell me what's on your mind. What do you want to know? What do you want to learn?
I'm very sorry to interrupt, but
yes.
For those of you who are not students here and may be parked on campus, if you're not parked in visitor parking, I should give you a visitor parking pass. So just come on up and see me at some point, and I'll do that. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So let's just kind of fire around the room. Go ahead.
I have solidarity economics on my mind right now, and wondering how to get different entities to work together for a common goal.
Okay, Rachel, thank you. Yes. What's your name?
My name is Yusuf.
Yusuf. Okay. Talk to me.
I was coming here with the idea that I get somewhat of a grasp of how to find the funding that one is looking for.
So you're an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and you want to find some dough.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Yusuf, thank you. What's your name?
I'm Zach.
Zach.
And, I'm the same idea as you.
Are you guys working together?
We're not.
Okay. What kind of business do you have in mind?
I mean, there's more than one, but.
Well, give me your best idea.
The best idea, in my opinion, or for others. I mean, for me, I guess.
No, your opinion. Your opinion's the only one that counts here.
Right. It's basically I want to kind of start an app that allows college students to sell and buy books, because there's a lot of textbooks that
All right, now Zach, I got to tell you, that's been done before, you know. See, there's a little, so but that could be good. So and we can talk about that. All right, next, and your name is?
Darlene.
Darlene. What's on your mind today?
Also the finding funding, so when the time comes that I do want to start a business,
Yep.
I have an idea more or less of what route to go when it comes
Got
to
it.
that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and your name is?
I'm Josephine.
Josephine.
And,
Darlene and Josephine. All right, got it. Yep.
yeah, also how to find the funding, but also maybe budgeting because I don't know how much I'm going to spend developing some.
So that's a really, really important question. Josephine, I can't tell you how many businesses start and say, I got a great idea for a business, we're going to get going, and they don't even think about, well, how much money do I need? And more importantly, when am I going to run out of money? So I'm really impressed and happy to hear that you're thinking about that already. And what kind of business might you want to start?
More like a mental health app.
A mental health, I could use that. Help me. What is that? What does that mean?
Well, I feel like most people, including adults,
Including adults, but not exclusively adults. All right. Yes.
like don't really know how to manage their emotions effectively.
Boy, you're right. I think there's a huge market for that. Okay. All right. So we're going to have to hear more about that. And you're next. Yes.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a student here at Hampshire, and I'm looking at creating an MVP and a for-profit, nonprofit, new way at looking at substance use treatment, specializing in the opioid epidemic.
Okay. So interestingly, I like to digress. Interestingly, we have had working with a company that we may provide some funding through our UMass fund, where they have ways of tracking body movements. So if you're going like this, it means you're smoking. And it's able to detect people who are smoking, so that if they're smoking, you know, the wearable will buzz and say, stop doing that. It can help advise people on environments where they might be prone to be doing smoking. So there's some really interesting things being done. I'm seeing with wearables and things of that nature. Anyway, thank you, Michelle. Yes, next. Could you just speak up a little bit, Kelly?
Yeah, my name is Callie.
Callie.
She, her, they, them pronouns, and I'm just here to see if I learn.
Just want to take it all in. That's great. Okay, next.
I'm Sarah. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm here because I'm in Div 3 and I'm looking for getting funding for my project, which is supposed to be about reducing waste on campus, and a lot of the ideas that I have require an initial investment before it'll be like.
Okay, so another person looking for funding. That's helpful to know. Yes, sir.
My name's Jackson. I'm an Div 2 entrepreneurship student here at Hampshire.
And what does Dip 2 mean?
Oh, it's just, I mean, it's like I'm in my second year,
Okay.
basically.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm trying to decide what type of funding I want to go for. Basically, I feel like there are three routes, sort of nonprofit, kind of social enterprise, and then like venture capital.
Yep.
And I'm just trying to figure out which one my business that I'm trying to build really applies to most.
Okay. Yes.
My name is Camilo.
Yeah.
I'm just generally interested in all the different ways people can make money or fund their ventures.
So you're a capitalist all the way.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I'm very much. I mean, that's the dominant theme right now in our society. So it's something I'm interested in learning more about, but not necessarily taking part in.
Okay, got it. Yep. I know Shri. Yes, sir. You.
Yeah, my name is Pharrell. I'm in Brett's entrepreneurial class.
Yep.
I'm currently working on international internship entrepreneurial venture, and I'm more interested in learning about funding internationally, like people that understand, like, so more specifically, like Africa. So I'm looking for money to fund that part of the region, like not like funding, but like to create a business, like an interrelational. I don't know how to word it, but
That's okay.
yeah.
I got it. So you're looking to fund a business that may be able to operate in Africa, and are you thinking along the lines of social entrepreneurship?
Yeah. It's gonna be. So I spend most of my time like overseas.
Yeah. Whereabouts?
Huh?
Whereabouts? Are you from Africa?
Yeah.
Okay.
Guinea. So the majority of my semesters here have been like in African countries and like some Europe and stuff like that. And
Okay.
I've partaken in internships. So I want to like kind of create one just like that. So again, like, I'm just like I want to like learn how to. I'm looking for people that understand and people that are more inclined to fund projects outside of the U.S.
Okay, got it. And tell me your name again. Pharrell.
Yeah.
Okay. And you are?
I'm Colleen Campbell, and I have a business. We have a 501c3 that rescues unwanted horses and dogs, retrains for service in animal-assisted programs.
Okay.
So right now we're trying to decide whether we stay a 501c3 or if we
become for-profit?
For-profit, whether we have a rescue portion, 501c3, and then a structured, and what kind of funding is available for what we're doing.
Okay. So I think that my sense, and there are some obviously variations, but my sense is that the common theme is that you want to learn a little bit about funding sources, where can I get money, maybe what might fit my company and things of that nature. So let me begin there. And so I teach a course in entrepreneurial finance, and we spend an entire semester talking about the different ways that you might be able to fund your business. And we probably spend more time on venture capital, but it's somewhat ironic because venture capital in a lot of ways is the hardest money to get. And when you look at the ways that companies are funded, probably the smallest percentage of companies are funded with venture capital. I was going to spend some time talking about venture capital, but I think based on what I'm hearing from you guys, maybe I'll spend a little bit less time talking about venture capital, maybe talking about some alternative sources. So let me begin with, let me say a few words about crowdfunding. How many of you are familiar with crowdfunding? Okay, so crowdfunding, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a relatively new way of raising money through the internet. And there's you guys have probably heard of Kickstarter. That's probably as well known as any crowdfunding site there is. And with Kickstarter, you can raise money, and usually, not usually, it's always on a project basis. So I'm a musician, and I want to create a CD. I make films, I want to make a movie. Maybe I want to create an app. Maybe I want to create, build a cooler that's got a built-in can opener and and a radio built in. I mean, there's all kinds of different products that one might build. So I mentioned it because some of you have some ideas that are product-based. And so with a Kickstarter campaign, you're trying to raise money, and generally you're raising, maybe $10,000 to $100,000. You're not going to raise $200,000 unless it's a real outlier. But one of the interesting things about, say, a Kickstarter campaign, you can go to the website and you can follow the rules, and you'll make a video describing what your product is, what your offering is. But one of the interesting things about that is that not only you raise some money, the people who participate in the Kickstarter campaign don't take an ownership interest in the company, so you don't have to give up any equity. All you've got to do is deliver them something. So usually it's an initial version of the product. So if I'm suppose I want to do a music video, Maybe if someone only puts up $5, all they get from me, the only reward you get is a thank you note. But if you put up $20 or $25, you get a copy of the CD. If you put up $100, you get the CD and you get a T-shirt. And if you put up $500, I'll come and do a concert at your house. So it's a series of rewards. So I don't have to give up an ownership interest, but more than anything, it's a way for your product to get out there, to get known. And, importantly, somebody used the term MPV, minimum viable product. It's a way to get out there and to test your product and get consumers using it. Maybe you get a little buzz, maybe somebody writes up something interesting on the internet. And so that's just an idea. If you guys are looking for a menu of ways to raise money, relatively small, we're not talking about millions of dollars, that's something to think about. Now, there are other crowdfunding sites where you're not delivering a product, but you're actually giving a little slice of the pie. You're giving a little piece of ownership of your company. And Angel List is probably the best known site for that. So that's something to think about, okay? Another thing I think to think about is for some projects, and I'm sorry, is it Pharrell? Is that for something like Pharrell was talking about, to the extent that maybe there's a humanitarian element, maybe there's a social good, maybe there's something like that you have in mind for some of the projects in Africa. It's conceivable that you could get a grant to do that. Now, and there's all kinds of government grants that are available in the whole world of science and technology. The National Science Foundation has a robust grant program, but there's a whole lot others. And Pharrell, there's a website called I think it's called grants.com, which is a government-run site that is probably the best source out there. And there's constantly new government grants being posted. And so, for some of the kinds of projects that you're thinking about, things like government grants might be a good thing to explore. Now, the trick is to really understand what the government grant program is and to make sure that what you're doing fits their criteria and fits what they're looking for. Where I think people make the biggest mistakes in the whole area of government grants is that because sometimes the government grants are worded in ways, it's like reading an insurance policy, or, you need 6 lawyers in order to really interpret it. And I probably wouldn't be one of the lawyers to interpret it. And that oftentimes people will apply for a grant, but they're not really fitting, their project doesn't really fit what the grant looks for. So either you got to tailor your project to fit that government grant opportunity, or you got to look for something else. But there's also, even for some of the rest of you, this whole world of government grants is something that really is overlooked, and it's, as the name suggests, it's some free money. You got to go through a process of completing an application, but for instance, I bring a bunch of entrepreneurs into my classes, and I had one not long ago where there's a company based out in Pittsfield, and they needed some equipment, and they just happened to learn that the city of Pittsfield was doing some economic development grants, and they had to fill out a fairly complete application, but they got a $5,000 grant to buy a piece of equipment that they needed. And that's, $5,000 that they didn't have to go borrow from a bank. It's $5,000 they didn't have to bring some investor in and give up a piece of their company. And so, there are all kinds of, from the federal government down to the municipality, where if you look under the right rock and you look in the right place, you can get what we call non-dilutive funding. And what I mean by non-dilutive funding is that you don't have to dilute your ownership interest. You don't have to give up a piece of that precious pie that you own in order to raise some money for your business. So those are a couple of what I might call, non-traditional sort of investor-based sources for your business. But let's talk about sort of investor-based sources. And I think it's really, really critical. Probably the most important thing to do is to really honestly size up your business so that you know what kind of investors are the right fit for you. And I put it in sort of two real broad categories, and it's probably best for me to explain by example. There are certain businesses that may be very nice businesses, but they provide the ultimate objective of providing income for me as the owner-operator of the business. So what might be a good example? Well, I wanted to start a yoga studio in Amherst or in Northampton or Hadley. That's probably a business, where I'm going to have to rent some space, I'm going to have to pay the yoga instructors, I'm probably going to have to buy some mats, or maybe I want to start a shoe store in Amherst. And I got to rent some space, and I got to buy some inventory, I'm going to pay people to work the desk. That's a business that I'm hoping is going to generate a steady stream of income for me as the owner. But it's probably not going to be a company that is going to experience growth to the degree that somebody who invests in my business is going to be able to take that initial investment that they make and wind up making 3, 5, 10, in the case of investing in something like Twitter or Uber or whatever, 100 or 1,000 times my original investment. And so the yoga studio, the shoe store, the restaurant, by and large, is what we call a lifestyle business. It's to generate a lifestyle for me, the owner-operator. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some exceptions. And some exceptions might be, I start a yoga studio, but I've got a really sort of differentiating methodology, and I decide I want to franchise it, and I want to start similar yoga studios like that. I go from Amherst to Northampton. Next thing I know, I'm into Boston. Next thing I know, I'm in New York, and before you know it, I'm on the West Coast. So I've got a methodology. And by 10, 15, by some accounts, even 20% of the businesses in the United States are franchises. And so it involves developing a business process that is, and also a brand name for my business, that is something that I can really scale to a big level. Now, but those are that takes a lot of work. That's a much, much bigger task than simply opening my yoga studio in Amherst. It means developing, really marketing, developing a brand name that becomes recognizable. Like there's a lot of individual massage studios around, but then you got Massage Envy, which is kind of this national thing. Well, they put a lot of money into their brand, into their name, into marketing, into creating an infrastructure for franchising. But that's sort of the exception. So anyway, one big category of businesses are what I call these lifestyle businesses. The other big category of businesses, and this is where you talk about trying to attract some serious investment for your business, are businesses that really are ones that are poised for significant growth. And I like to draw pictures, so I'm going to just sort of give you sort of a lay of the land of the different types of investors that we might be thinking about. So if we think about kind of the growth of our business, we might begin with an idea where, some of us are, and we maybe have a bunch of ideas, right? But we begin with an idea. And then maybe we build a prototype. And then once we've built our prototype, maybe we have a pilot project somewhere. Our first customer who tests it out, gives us feedback. And then maybe we might, if it's technology-based, we might get a patent. We might develop some intellectual property protection. Maybe we start to get some revenues. Then we really grow. And then at the end of the day, we sell our business. So that's kind of we exit. And we kind of go, it looks like, this. And then it really kind of goes up here when we're really growing. And up here, we hope to sell the business for, millions and millions of dollars. Now, early on, maybe I need up to, $200,000. Now here maybe I need $1 million. Here maybe I need, a $5 million infusion so I can really market and grow and so forth. And so all along this little journey, I'm establishing certain proof points, or put differently, I'm lessening the risks. I'm de-risking my business. Because obviously, if I haven't built the it's all I have is an idea, and I haven't really established that I can build a prototype, there's uncertainty here. Maybe I don't have the tools. Maybe I don't have the right technology. Maybe it just simply doesn't work. Okay, so I build the prototype. Now I got to decide, am I going to be able to find a customer? Is anybody actually going to want this? Is actually anybody going to want to use it? And so there's a question mark there. Is the Patent and Trademark Office going to give me a patent? Maybe one person's going to buy it here, but here when I'm starting to get revenues and I'm really hoping to grow, I'm really hoping to roll it out. I'm hoping that this thing's going to go viral. I'm hoping that I'm going to have a whole bunch of people that are interested in my app. And so in each one of these steps along the way, I'm creating additional proof points, and I'm really and I'm creating, as a potential investor, it becomes a less and less risky enterprise. And so there are different types of investors who are willing to accept different risk profiles. And oftentimes, getting this first $200,000 is the hardest money to get, because I haven't proved a damn thing, right? And so oftentimes I'm going to have to go to, most often, these are people who either know me personally, so it could be friends and family, or it's somebody who has a particular interest in the business sector and knowledge of the business sector that I'm hoping to build an app, or I'm hoping to build a medical device, or I'm hoping to create whatever it is I'm trying to create. And so one of the things that, the great thing that you're doing here at Hampshire with your seed fund is that you're providing this early funding to get these businesses launched and to build that initial prototype. And it's the same thing that we're doing with this fund at UMass that I mentioned a few minutes ago. This is often the hardest money to get, even though it's the smallest amount. And it's not until you really kind of have built the pilot and you may be beginning to show some customer traction that the more traditional, venture capitalists are interested in investing in your business. There are some venture capitalists who will maybe find an entrepreneur that they have a prior experience with, that they love, that they're willing to work with. But for a first-time entrepreneur, it's real hard to get VC interest at this point. And then, and VCs have different flavors. One of the things that you need to know about this whole VC world is that VCs specialize. Just because I'm a VC doesn't mean that I'll invest in anything. Some VCs specialize in healthcare technology. Others specialize in medical device technology. Others specialize in software. Others specialize in international ventures, and on and on and on. So part of the trick is, first of all, find some of these early backers, almost invariably people that you have some sort of relationship with, somebody that you, and so, as would-be entrepreneurs, if, unless you come from a family where you got an uncle with a pretty fat checkbook, one of the things that you should be thinking about is really expanding this network of people who might be people that you could build relationships with and who can be early backers. Yes?
Is this also where you see programs like the Accelerator through like Valley Venture?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Let me talk about that. I'm glad you raised that. So it's developing this network, and is it Marie? Michelle. Michelle just asked the question about incubators and accelerators, and let me just explain what those are. There have increasingly become organizations that really help foster this early stage and this growth. And they are programs, and it might be a 6, 8, 10-week program, and Venture Valley Mentors is one of them, based in Springfield, where you apply for the program and they'll accept a limited number of companies in each what they call a cohort. And you go with a bunch of other entrepreneurs and you get mentoring and you get coaching, and they bring potential investors in, and they bring people in to advise you on marketing and advise you on how to, technical things on building prototypes and the like. And that's a great networking source, particularly if you're not, somebody who sort of comes from a well-heeled family environment, or you have a bunch of friends who are willing to write out checks. And oftentimes, people just getting into college really aren't in those positions. And what you try to do is you try to position yourself so that you can build that prototype and maybe get some of these early proof points. So what are some of the things that that venture capitalists really look for? I mean, when you're building your app, okay, you're building, you're coming up with your idea. I mean, what are some of the critical things that you have to do to be able to demonstrate to a venture capitalist, or be interesting to a venture capitalist? Because understand, these venture capitalists get, and even our little fund at UMass, and maybe you're experiencing the same thing with your seed fund here, where you get many, many more applications for funding than you can actually satisfy. So what are some of the things that investors look for? Well, first of all, I think the most important thing is that they want to see that you've built something that really fits a market need. They're really looking for something that, particularly an investor who's looking to invest in something that's really going to have the high growth. Is there a real pain point, and is this team really solving a particularly painful issue? So, I can give you an example. I can almost explain it, in a negative way. So I had somebody a student come to me a couple of weeks ago, and they said, well, there was a real problem because social media is just uninteresting. And so, so what we've done is we've developed an app that allows people to create videos and they can have contests as to who's got the best video, and that will make social media interesting. And I got to ask this group, how many of you think social media is uninteresting? Okay, so you guys are totally with me. I thought the whole premise, I mean, think of all that, you can't walk down the street without people, looking on their phone, and maybe it's not always social media, but it's probably pretty often social media. And think of all that, the time that we're spending on social media. So the whole premise that social media is uninteresting and that I need to create an app, I need to create a business that enables people to create videos and allows people to vote on which video is better, it didn't strike me as a real problem that needed to be solved. On the other hand, there are problems out there that need to be solved. There are some obvious examples in the world of life sciences. I mean, there are diseases, orphan diseases that need to be addressed. There are things out there that can be done better, cheaper, faster in whatever world we might be living in. And so the key is to identify, is there a real problem? Does this team have a solution, and perhaps a differentiating solution to a real problem? And does this team have the ability to be able to really execute? Do they understand the industry? Do they understand what regulations might be involved? Do they understand how they're going to roll the product out? Do they understand who some important key customers might be? Have they been able to establish some key customers? So we recently invested in a business that's a food-based product. It's kind of like Cliff Bars, but it's made out of seeds. Well, they were able to get into Whole Foods, and they're now selling their product in Whole Foods up and down the East Coast. And so as an investor, we were very happy to write a check and invest in this company because they had proved by establishing the relationship with Whole Foods that people were interested, people were buying, and they really were developing a following. So I think that's a real critical point. One of the questions that people often ask is, well, I'm a first-time entrepreneur. It's not as though I've done this, been there, done that, already sold a business for 10, 20, 50, $100 million and proved to these investors that, I'm a seasoned, experienced entrepreneur. Does that mean that nobody's going to be willing to fund my company? And I think the answer to that is no. I mean, there's tons and tons of examples. I mean, the famous ones, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, and I realize those guys, come along maybe once in a generation, but I mean, those are classic examples of first-time entrepreneurs who came up with really good ideas and were able to execute, but it's certainly not limited to those. And with venture capitalists and investors that I talk to, they really look for people who demonstrate that whatever the business they're in, and Pharrell, maybe maybe you might be a good example as somebody who, you want to go back and do something in your native land. You understand your native land. You understand what the needs are. You're coming here to the United States. You're learning a bunch of things. You're meeting some people. You maybe have a lot that you can bring to the table back to your home, back to Ghana, whatever it might be. What you're really doing is you're pursuing your natural calling. Sometimes you hear people talking about pursuing their passion. They look for entrepreneurs who do that. And why is that important to investors? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Because I think investors want to see evidence that you will stick with what you start.
That's exactly right. That's precisely the point. Starting these businesses is tough. And you're going to run into some bumps in the road. And the successful entrepreneurs are ones who say, okay, I had a tough day at the office, I had a tough week at the office, I lost that customer, yeah, we got to go back and tweak the technology and make it work, whatever it might be, but I'm going to stick with it because I'm really committed to it. So let me ask you this, as a potential investor, what are some of the things that you might want to look for to put that through the acid test? What are some things that might be important to you? Put your investor hat on. You're sizing up a first-time entrepreneur. What might you look for? Yes?
I would look for someone who displays that they have knowledge of the ins and outs of what they're trying to do. If they have this idea but haven't done much research into what they're trying to do and how they're going to do it, then it doesn't make much sense to be putting money into that.
Okay, I think you're absolutely right. What else? Yes?
I think you may want to look into how much they've been working on the project before they came up to you. To see if they have, if it's not something that they just took off and are just looking for money. Like.
So they really committed to it? Have they worked it? Have they developed some relationships in the area? Do they know who the players are? Yes, Pharrell.
I think I would say like credibility. Like, why is this person the right person for this? And
do they have a history in it?
Yeah.
I mean, are you from Ghana? Do you know Ghana? Whatever it might be. Yep.
And also, if they failed before, like if they failed, what did they learn from that experience?
Yeah. Another just simple thing is investors want to know that you're really committed to it. So one of the big issues is, are you so committed to this that you're willing to make this your full-time job? Or is this just kind of a sideline, or is this a hobby? Okay, so those are some of the sort of things that I might put into the category of passion and desire and willing to go through the hurdles. What else? As an investor, I'm also concerned about execution. I'm also concerned that you're actually going to be able to pull it off. So what do you think I might look for as an investor? Yes, tell me your name again.
Ta.
Ta, yeah.
So knowing your target market and how to acquire them.
Okay, great point. What else?
What other people you have on board with your idea?
Yeah, you are awesome. You are really, Rachel, you are hot today. Because it's really, really hard to do it alone. And, each of us have our own set of skills. Maybe I'm the technical guy, maybe I'm the technology guy, maybe Rachel, you're the business person or the marketing person or just the overall brains behind the operation. I suspect that's what your role is. And so you do want to have a bit of a diversification on the team. And also recognize what your needs are. So sometimes people will say to me, well, I've got a technology person and I'm the business person, but we know we need somebody for business development or customer acquisition, or we need somebody to manage, be the chief financial officer or whatever it might be. And, is that a fatal flaw? And I think the critical thing when you're dealing with a prospective investor is to be honest enough to identify where your needs are, as opposed to saying, oh no, we don't need that, we can do it all. And so I think that's a really critical point. Now, you mentioned markets. An investor is going to what are they going to want to know about the market? What are they going to look for? What are they going to be thinking about? What are they going to be worried about? Shri.
Can you repeat that?
So as you're talking to an investor. An investor says, yeah, okay, I think this team has some passion. I think this team has the stick-to-itness we're looking for. We think this team understands what they need to do. But I'm trying to understand what the market is for the product. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand the market. And what do I, as an investor, what do I want to know about the market? What am I going to look for? What kind of markets am I going to look for? Why is market important?
To see the other players and how they're growing and how the market is growing as a whole.
Well, the first thing is how big is the market, right? I mean, I want to be able to get into markets where, you know, there's a pretty big need for the product, okay? Does that mean that it's got to be a huge market, or could it be okay that it's a smaller market, but I'm going to really be able to be if not a dominant player, an important player in the market? Is that okay too?
I think that's fine as long as the market is growing.
Yep.
In the sense that when e-commerce started, there was literally no market. There's only retail market.
Okay.
But e-commerce is a way which, you know, now the market is growing. So when, I think in 1990s when people invested in e-commerce, it was like, okay, this is the opportunity. So, you know, this is how they can grow.
And just so that we all understand, just so that we're all very clear, why is market size important? And let me give you a little hint.
It's because it's going to determine how much you can make.
So I, as an investor, and maybe I'm investing here, okay, and I'm putting my money in, but I'm hoping that, and this is sort of the value of the company, right? I'm hoping that when I invest in the company, you know, early stage in the company, I'm hoping that that my investment value is going to grow, and so that I'm going to own a piece of a company where the value of the company has gone from here all the way up to here, okay? And so why? Because as an investor, this is risky stuff, okay? I'm investing at the pilot stage. We still don't really have much in terms of customers. But I'm betting that this is a good market. I'm betting that there's a team that can execute. I'm betting that this is actually going to turn into a pretty sizable market. And so when I'm investing here, I'm looking to take that $200,000 investment and turn that $200,000 investment into $1 million or $2 million or $3 million. I'm looking for a big multiple on my return on investment because this is risky stuff. You know, if I want to make 6% on my money, I'm probably going to invest in the public stock market. I'm going to be investing in businesses that already have clients and revenues, and you know, I'm hoping they're going to grow. But you know, this is the part of my investment portfolio where I'm hoping for, you know, a 10-time return on my investment. So I want to look at the market. Now, one of the things that, you know, I bring a bunch of entrepreneurs into my class, and one of the things that that I see is that, you know, you got people entering, you know, new exciting markets in the life sciences, or I just had somebody come in a couple of weeks ago with a pretty cool fitness app that is not just measuring heartbeat, but is really geared much more toward wellness and for high performance athletes, and kind of, you know, creating an entirely new market. But the other thing that I see is that oftentimes there are people that are doing work in sort of old stodgy markets, but they're doing things in a brand new way. So I can tell you by way of example that I just had an entrepreneur in my class recently that is helping people get home mortgages, you know, kind of an old stodgy world of business, but getting home mortgages using the internet and getting home mortgages at lower rates and leveraging information that can be obtained off the internet and sort of cutting out some of the middlemen in the whole mortgage business. So it's kind of an old stodgy market, but they're creating a whole new way of doing it. And boy, are they attracting some venture capital investors. And so it's not as though you always have to be kind of the most, you know, exciting, newest kid on the block. Oftentimes you can enter markets where there are already businesses but you're doing it better, cheaper, faster, more efficiently, smarter, developing new ways of doing things. So there's all kinds of ways to be creating these new ventures in interesting ways. All right, I want to pause for a second because I'd love to try to address some of the early questions, but I haven't addressed them all, so I'd love to take some questions. Anybody? Yes?
So if we have a business now, we have a model, we're looking into doing curriculum certification programs, and then replicating our model and putting it in other areas. How do we start?
Curriculums, programs for what?
So we take in an animal, we train them for service or animal assisted program, and we match them with a person, which has been done before.
Yep.
But we are taking in rescues, which lowers the euthanasia rate in the country.
Yep.
And we're also working with the psychiatric service dogs with the PTSD and the autism,
Yep.
which is helping with this veteran suicide rate. So we've got a lot of different pieces that we help, that we want to run this model in other areas where there is an overpopulation with animals or there is a higher suicide rate.
So you want to do it in other sectors. I mean, autism's already covered and veterans are already covered, but you're looking for essentially new markets?
We're looking to run our market in other areas where the veterans and the animals aren't getting as much help.
So other markets, other geographic markets.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
So how do we start that journey into building into something that would be a franchise or would be something we can replicate and put in other areas?
So is the question, how do I develop relationships in the new markets? So maybe are you known here in the Amherst, Northampton, Western Mass market? Is the question, how do I get into New York and how do I get into Ohio and St. Louis? Is that the question?
Sort of. We want to have finding a team or somebody who can help us actually develop a model that we can bring to those areas.
That you can replicate.
And how do we find investors that give us the money that allows us to build it, replicate it, and then get into other areas?
So I can just maybe make a few general comments, okay? So I think that one of the way for you to get into St. Louis, where nobody knows you, okay, presumably, is to do things really well here, okay, and to have people who can be validators for you. So for instance, and I'm making this up, maybe you can help me, but if there is an autism group, or a veterans group here in Western Massachusetts, and there are people in the leadership position in that group, and you're doing things really well, and you're known here, and those people who are in the positions of leadership, whether it's the veterans group or the autism group, whatever, can validate you with their counterparts, whatever the counterpart veterans group is in St. Louis or Ohio or whatever. It strikes me that's a way to go, okay? Another thing that I've seen, and I don't know how applicable it is to your sector, but there are people that are influencers in a lot of these markets. They're bloggers. Like you see it in the food space a lot. So there are these food bloggers who will write about kind of exciting trends in food or food products. But there's all kinds of blogging in the health area. I mean, think of all of the, the people who give, you got something wrong, and you're worried about, gee, I got a pain in my arm. You go on the internet and it probably scares you to death. You immediately think you have cancer because no matter what, there are always these people on the internet who are scared that, at least for me, if I stub my toe, I go on the internet and I think I might probably have to have my foot amputated. But there are these bloggers out there that can be real influencers, and I've seen that done real effectively. Another thing is that I suspect that what you're doing is one that could probably get a lot of free publicity. I mean, you're doing a really good thing. And I mean, veterans are people, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people out there who have, you know, have veterans or family members. You know, look at all of that's been stirred up, you know, with the National Football League and the flag. And I mean, there's a lot of veteran support, right? And I would think that what you're doing could be subject to a fair amount of free press. And so I wouldn't think that it would be too hard, you know, for you to get known, if not St. Louis, Boston, Vermont, you know, maybe closer to home. So those would be things that I would be thinking about. And then in terms of attracting money, you know, maybe there's some non-traditional support. You know, I'd be going back to what I said at the very beginning about, are there some government grants? I mean, what you're describing strikes me as something that there's some real possibility for grants, for support. Now, you mentioned at the outset that you're a 501c3, and that's a fancy way of saying that you're a nonprofit, and you've set it up so that you can get charitable contributions. And one of the debates that companies have is that, you know, if you set yourself up as a nonprofit, it means that you're constantly dependent upon these government grants. You're constantly having to write these government grants, and you're kind of living from grant to grant. And there are some businesses who are sort of doing altruistic kinds of things, if I can generalize, who say, you know, I'm going to burn myself out on trying to continuously write government grants, and I want to become for-profit. And I think that, you know, if I can develop a revenue model so that I can commercialize what I'm doing, and I can make some money doing it, maybe I can attract some investors. Now, I don't know whether there's a revenue model in what you're doing, but you're going to have to think that through before considering whether you can convert from a 501c3 to a for-profit model. So those are some thoughts. I hope they might be helpful. Yes?
We've worked a lot with Brett in some of our business courses, learning and understanding our competitive advantage and our value propositions.
Yep.
And when you're at that point, when you're looking to consider venture capitalists, do you feel like in a for-profit business, let's say, it's good to diversify, you know, where you're getting your venture capital? Do you like to...
I mean, get more than one?
Yeah.
More than one? Well, sure. So, so certainly when you're negotiating investment terms, it's nice to have more than one investor so that there's some competition, and because the best way to get the best terms is to have is for the investors to feel as though there's potential competition. So that's important. I thought you might be also going in a little bit other direction with your question, because, you know, one of the questions is, in terms of my product development, do I really establish a toehold in sort of a narrow vertical market, or do I try to do a whole bunch of things across a whole bunch of different markets? And I think most of the businesses that I see really try to establish themselves in a strong way in an individual market and develop a reputation and go from there. The other thing, sort of similarly, is that you know, oftentimes you hear and you read that I'd much rather have 100 customers who absolutely love my product than 1,000 customers who like my product. Why do you think that might be the case?
The people that love your product are going to talk more about it. And
they're going to talk, they're going to tell their friends about it, they're going to be your supporters, they're going to write stuff, you know, on the comment section, at the bottom of the product page, as opposed to, yeah, it's good, but, you know, I'm busy and now I got to go to the gym. So, you know, those are some of the, you know, some of the things to think about. Other thoughts? Yeah.
So basically, if we have an idea and then we want to go to the seed round, so what exactly is the investor looking for in the sense that is it the number of users? Is it the number of users who are paying? What do they like? Is it more the revenue or the number of users? What would you say?
I think you want to, well, I mean,
Early stage.
yeah, so.
Like how do you present that case to the investor saying that, hey, we are generating revenue? Or you rather press more on, hey, we have users who are testing it, and these are the testimonials, and this is the interest they're showing, and how do you put that case for it?
So it's going to vary a lot, okay? So if you're doing, and I think one of the big differences is it a consumer good or is it a business-to-business good product, okay? If it's consumer good, then you're going to want to show a decent amount of consumer, some consumer traction. Now, it can be 100 people who love it, okay? But you're probably not going to get away with, you and your roommate and your uncle as consumer proof points, okay? On the other hand, if it's a business-to-business product and you can find a marquee customer, a Mass General Hospital, just in the medical area, a hospital system, a Fortune 1000 company that is willing to do a test drive of your product. In business to business, maybe one marquee client that people say, wow, if Mass General is using it, then that must be pretty good. And Mass General is not only using it, but they like it. And in fact, these old machines that they've had around for a number of years, people are now switching to this new device, and they're willing to go through the training and they're willing to go through the effort to do it the new way using this new technology. Now you really got something interesting. On the other hand, in the world of consumer goods, I think it's going to be different. Yeah, you had a question.
Oh, yeah. So.
And we're now 2 minutes after 1, so can I keep going?
If people have to go to classes, that's, feel free. We're not holding you back from doing that. But I believe we have the room till 1:30.
Okay, so we'll go for another 10, 15 minutes if you want. I mean, we don't, or whatever. Go ahead with your question.
Sure. So I'm thinking about kind of what my cases are for pitching to investors, and one of mine for my business is that I can explain briefly what it is, but
go ahead.
I feel like
Explain it.
Okay, so I'm developing a career development program for aspiring independent musicians.
Yeah.
So I see, to some degree, I see the music industry really changing right now.
Yep.
And I feel like more and more musicians kind of they have more resources to be able to start their career on their own.
Yep.
But there's not much support to help them learn the skills needed to actually go out and do that.
Yeah.
So I feel like one of the best ways that I can defend my case to investors is to prove that the industry is changing in that way. And so, I mean, I'm familiar with the music scene and the fundamental reasons that it's changing, but I don't know the numbers and the history in detail to be able to make that case.
I don't think it's a tough. First of all, let me tell you about my friend Panos Panay. Panos Panay runs the Entrepreneurship program at Berkeley. And his whole thing is that not everybody who goes to Berkeley is going to win a Grammy Award, right? And so what he's trying to do is he's trying to teach Berkeley students ways to take their love of music and to be able to use it in commercial ways. Now, Panos, who went to Berkeley, developed an app, I think, that matched bands with venues or something like that. I don't think it's a very hard sell for you to establish that, not everybody's going to win a Grammy Award. And I mean, that's intuitively obvious, right? There's only so many Grammy. So it kind of depends on how you pitch it and how you tell the story. I don't think I'd spend a lot of my precious time and energy doing research to prove that musicians need help in career development. I think I would always take that as a given, I mean, we all need help in career development. Who doesn't need help in career development? So I think I'd be thinking about, finding some musicians who have done it effectively? You know, what are some characteristics of musicians who have been successful? Can I piece together some common trends and develop, you know, what are the tools that and maybe you talk to some of these successful musicians and you figure out, you know, what was their secret sauce, and then what are some tools that I can develop to help other people replicate that. And maybe you create an advisory board for your company of some successful musicians who can, people say, wow, you know, if Dave Matthews, not that you're going to get Dave Matthews, but, you know, whoever, if Dave Matthews is on my board of directors or my advisory board, you know, that's pretty good. Now, you know, you don't want to be another Trump University, not to get too political here, but I mean, you don't want, it's got to be real, right? But that's what I'd be thinking about.
You've talked a lot about what to look for when you're trying to get an income, but I'm wondering about like what it looks like to be a venture capitalist. Can you speak towards that? Like,
so what do venture capitalists do? How does that whole world work? What's the...
Yeah, I mean, so there's this like pot of money that they have that they
Yep.
can expend however they choose to, but I imagine that there are other projects that they have going on, so they...
So what's the life of a venture capitalist, okay? So the life of a venture capitalist is, first of all, they've got to get money to invest, okay? So a venture capital fund, real simply, is they create a fund, they identify some investors, and the investors give them a pot of money. And they're supposed to take the investors' money, and they're supposed to grow that pot of money into a larger pot of money, which they can then distribute to their investors and give them a multiple of return on their investment. And for the real early stage investors, you know, people investing, you know, in these high risk situations, you know, they may make 10 investments and they may hope that one of them generates 10, 20, 25 times the return on investment, maybe 1 out of 10. Maybe another one, you know, triples the money. Maybe a few of them kind of get the money back and then half of them don't go anywhere. But it's that one that generates 25 times the money, which is really what provides that big return of growing this pot into a larger pot. So first of all, the first thing they got to do is they got to raise the money to invest. Then they get a whole bunch of applicants for funding. They sift through them, and they might, you know, get 50 to 100 applicants for every investment that they make. And some firms will make, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 investments a year at most. They will typically want to monitor those investments. So the venture capitalists might sit on the board of directors of the company and watch it. And then ultimately, because they have to be able to provide a return to their investors, the way they get the return to on their investors is the company is sold. They will be looking for the company to be sold in 3, 5, 7 years, so that the sale proceeds can then be returned to the owners of the company, including the venture capitalists. Because remember, when we start up a company, you know, we got a pie, and the founders are going to own a piece of the pie, and the investors. So when we sell this pie to Google for $100 million, the investors are going to get a piece of that $100 million, and the founder, you know, owners, maybe employees are going to share in that $100 million. And maybe they bought this piece of the pie for an initial investment of $2 million, and now we're selling to Google for 100. And so this has, since they own half the company, they're taking $50 million from that $2 million investment that they initially made. So the life of the venture capitalist is they're investing, they're sitting on the board, and then ultimately hoping that the company is going to be sold, and they're hoping that that investment fund has been successful so that they can say, look, we had this, this venture fund, and we raised a bunch of money, and we gave returns to our investors of 5 times their money, and so we're really good venture capitalists. So you know what? I want to start another venture fund number 2, and I'll go out to my original investors, and maybe I'll try to raise more money this time, and maybe I'll try to bring in some more investors. So that's the life of the venture capitalist. And then the question is, well, how do venture capitalists make money? And they make money because they take a percentage, usually 20%, of the profits that they make from those investments. So if I have a venture capital fund and I raise, say it's a $10 million venture capital fund, and I turn that $10 million into $20 million, the investors will get the first $10 million back. I've made another 10, and the venture capitalists will take a piece of that appreciation in value from 10 to 20 million, and that's how they get paid.
How does that change in more social enterprise that might necessarily be a product that you can sell to people?
Well, there are venture funds that want to make money and do good at the same time. And there's a whole class of investors known as social entrepreneurs. And so when they're making their investment decisions, they're trying to do things that create social goods. But they're also trying to make money. For funds where they don't care about making money, it's more likely in the world of grants. It's more likely going to foundations that are trying to support certain causes. And foundations don't take ownership interests the way I've just described venture capitalists do. They'll say, if you got a worthy cause, I'm going to give you a grant of X $100,000 or whatever the money might be, and we're going to keep our eye on you. We're going to want you to provide us with regular reports about how you're spending the money. We may not give you the money all at once. We may dole it out to you as you achieve certain milestones. But that's a whole different world of money. And so but it's an important source of money. All right, well, listen, we're going to have another session after Thanksgiving, and we can, we'll cover a whole bunch of different topics. So anyway, thank you for your attention today. You've been fun to talk to, and I'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.